Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the fifth debate lecture, and today we're going to learn about POIs. So what is a POI? A POI, if you know in debates, there's something called a cross-examination. A cross-examination would be prop asking op or aff asking neg a certain question. It is often treated as the highlight of a public forum debate or a normal debate that we talk about, or even in general, like official meetings that are somewhat debate-ish. But POI is like the cross-X of AP debate, because there's no cross-examination in AP debate, and asking question is not primarily the key of AP debate. So POI would be something that is there that kind of acts like a cross-X. So think of it as a question, but that's a bit vague. So you might be thinking, hey, when I'm giving a debate, there's no room to give any questions. Well, that's right. That's why you're supposed to ask the question during the speech, which sounds a bit rude, but that is generally what a POI is. So how you would offer it is you only offer it to the PM, LO, DTM, DLO, GovWhip, all the way to the OpWhip. Notice that you are not allowed to give it in replies. And another debate jargon here is called protected time. So the first and the last minute will be protected. And when I'm saying the first and last minute, this doesn't include like the grace time. So basically from 0 to 1 minute, it'll be protected time. If it's a 6 minute AP, and the fifth to then I guess from the 5 minute mark to the 6 minute mark would be the protected time. So generally, if the clock hits 1:00, it can POI. If the clock hits 4:59, you should stop POI. But if it's a format that's 7 minutes, still the first and the last minute is protected. If the format is 8 minutes, the first and the last minute is protected. So we get it. It's a protected time where you can't POI. But when you can POI, what you're gonna say is you're gonna say POI verbally. And after saying POI verbally, while you're doing that, you're going to stand up, you're going to raise your hand while saying that, because that's generally the convention. You can say POI, or you can say point of information. You can also say point. Generally, these three are what people say, and I recommend that you say one of these three, and I wouldn't even recommend the second one. I would recommend you say POI or point. There are other types of debate other than AP, and there are, I guess, other cultures of AP debate where they say other stuff. For example, I've seen someone on Wikipedia like saying, "May I have this point?" or uh, like regarding that point or something. It's a bit too long. And I've also seen formats with like on something, like on something, I guess like on freedom or on something important. Maybe some PIs reveal the topic, but it's generally frowned upon in AP. And I guess one more thing is clarification, which is something that is legitimate, and I should have included this. You can say clarification, but personally, I don't know why you would, because why would you reveal that you're trying to clarify? Wouldn't you want to mask it and just say POI? So I wouldn't say clarification, but that is something that people will say. Clarification is simple, it's straightforward. When you want to clarify something, you would say that. So, and more continuing on the basic rules of POI, the thing is, there's something called stop badgering. And badger, as you know, is like harassing or annoying the person too much. And we call badgering in AP debate when you POI too often. How often is too often? It's too often when two POI offers are less than 15 seconds apart. That means if you said POI once, then the next time you can say POI is after 15 seconds. And some, not formats, but I guess some tournaments say 20 seconds. That is up to the tournament's discretion, but usually the rule says 15 seconds. And so you might be asking, hey, that's a bit ridiculous. You want me to go POI every 15 seconds? And my answer would be technically the rule allows that. So if you really, really want to, you can. But it is sometimes, not often, but at least sometimes frowned upon. For example, if you say POI every 15 seconds, like literally, some judges might hate that. I used to do that sometimes. I do that sometimes. But um, what's absolutely recommended, I would say, is POI 4 times in total. So between these what is it? 4 minutes? 4 minutes, POI 4 times. So that would be every minute. And basically that's good enough. And if you want POI a lot, I would say POI every 25 seconds, 30 seconds. That'd be fine. All right. And you might be thinking, so I, as the speaker speaking right now, by the way, POI has to be to the person speaking at the podium right now. You can't POI to someone on the bench. All right. So as the person speaking on the podium, how do I react to the POI? So first you can reject and you can accept, obviously. There is a format, I believe, in Europe where taking a POI is mandatory, but if you don't live in Europe, you're not going to see that often. So it is up to your discretion whether you take or don't take, i.e. accept or reject the POI. Now, what is recommended in the old-fashioned way is to take 2 POIs. That is in many rulebooks. Then in AP, you should take 2 POIs. That is no longer the convention. So what is most often done, especially in a 6-minute AP, is take 1 POI. If you're the speaker on the floor, you take 1 POI. If you take 2, that'd be considered as too much because you won't have enough time to make your own points. If you take 0, that is treated as not engaging enough. So you might think, oh, it's my freedom, I'll just take 0. No, that is indeed frowned upon. That may indeed take your points off of the speech. Now, this might be a little bit different if it's BP. For example, if it's BP 7 minutes, there are still quite some speakers that take 2 POIs. There are quite some that take 1 or 2. In world schools, a bit wishy-washy. Some take 2, some take 1. But if you're speaking 6 minutes, or let's say speaking 4 minutes, I'll just advise you take 1. All right. And you might be thinking, okay, how do I accept it? That's pretty simple. You say yes. But the thing is, you probably don't want to do that exactly what you might be thinking. Because what's conventional in a POI taker is you don't take it when they actually offer it. When they actually offer it, you reject it. And then when your speech comes to a natural break, i.e. when it becomes the time that it becomes natural for you to take the POI, or the time that you want to take the POI, then you will take it when you want to do it. So before moving on to my second argument, I'll take a POI. It's something that you would say. And you might be thinking, how do I reject the POI? What often happens is people say, no thank you, or they say rejected, or they just do this motion. Now, me personally, I just ignore it, but that's not treated as a really good habit. So I would just recommend doing this because it really gets annoying, both to the judge and for the speaker speaking on the podium to say no thank you every time someone says POI. It's not my thing. All right, so that was quite of a lot. And other stuff. A POI, the person giving the POI, it must be 15 seconds maximum. So anywhere from 0 to 15 seconds. Now, there are 2 preferences of POI, I guess. There are people that like long POIs, people that like short POIs. If you're giving a short POI, then your objective would be to stun the speaker, to make the speaker surprised and be unable to answer to the question. So in that case, your POI would be 0 seconds, not 0, like maybe like 4 seconds, 3 seconds, like 1 sentence. Another POI is the 15-second POI, where this is something that not many people talk about, but it's something I believe in, takes 15 seconds away from the time of the speaker on the podium, which you can really tell if the speaker really wants to use their own time. But you're taking a whole 15 seconds away from that. That does get annoying. So I think that's one benefit. But B, obviously, if you're giving a 15-second POI, you can give like a semi-point at least. Like you can give at least a semi-quasi stretched out rebuttal to their point to actually contribute to the debate. So the point is, depending on your objective, the length of the POI be decided, but the maximum would be 15 seconds. Okay. Other rules in a POI is that a POI cannot be a compound point. So a POI only can be 1 point. For example, you cannot say, what do you think of A and what do you think of B? You can only say, what do you think of A? Another rule in a POI that is often enforced and sometimes not enforced is that it must be a question. Now, I think this rule is there because it wants to imitate cross X, or because I guess asking a question is generally treated as a desirable rebuttal. But many tournaments also don't force this, so you might be forced to frame it to phrase it into a question like, "Are you aware that something, and what do you think of something?" But just listen to the tournament's directions. I would personally not care that much and just say what I want instead of doing a question. All right. So that's kind of it for the rules, I believe. There's a bunch of rules, and it does get annoying. Um, so let's focus on AP, because I do believe AP and BP POIs are quite different. All right. So in an AP, when does a POI actually matter? You might be thinking. The answer to that is this is very unclear, and I would say somewhat unagreed upon. Because if you ask any coach, they would kind of say it is very important. But me personally, I disagree. Because, okay, yeah, POIs are very flashy, it takes away the attention of many speakers, and POIs do serve as a moment for the non-debaters, I guess. But in my opinion, at the end of the day, it's a 15-second one-time thing. It's a 10-second one-time thing. And what I believe is important in a debate is not what it is in face value, but how it contributes to the entire debate. And does a 15-second POI contribute to an entire debate? No, not really. No, not really. Because uh a win-loss is obviously decided by clashes and who won the clashes and the importance of the clashes. And to that scheme, does a POI affect that? No. But what I do believe POI affects is A, it might affect the verdict slightly. Again, this is only true in AP and BP. It will actually it might change the verdict, but in AP it's just like slightly. But the second, I think the actual function of POI or what when it actually matters is like the speaker points. It shows how much like the a speaker is being engaging. So I think it does affect the speaker point, the individual speaker point. And I guess the third thing is just the general, the atmosphere, the ambience, the aura about how the debate feels and how it's going and who's winning. That could be a part of it, especially if it's offline. And just to show that you're engaging in the debate. Now, what do you do in POIs and how do you use it? I think there are many types, and if you the first rule, something that I always say in lectures is just be logical. I won't even tell you to be logical here. Just if you think you got a good POI, just do it. That's probably the correct answer. But that's also not the common case. Common case is that you don't know what POI to give, I think. So I would give you some advice on what to give. So there are some annoying POIs and effective POIs, I guess. But one type I would just say is pointing out a flaw. Did their side make a horrible mistake? Did they say something factually incorrect? Did they say something very offensive or dangerous or risky? Did they say something that is genuinely just hard to rebut to? Hard to defend? Then you just point that out. And if it's a question that you genuinely think they don't have a good answer to, that might be a good POI. Like, for example, let's say that they made a contradiction. Hey, you said this and he said that. So what's the correct one? It's very difficult to answer something like that. So just a generally a pretty good question that's hard to rebut, that's obviously a good POI. But that would be very obvious. Like if you're asking a question to anyone, like even in a conversation, and you ask a question that's difficult to answer to, that's obviously a good POI. That's obviously a good question. So that's just the obvious one. Second is what's kind of, I would say, losing its trend, like it's being treated as less important by today, is the principal POI. This is the POI that goes, hey, what do you think of X? What do you think of batting X? And basically what this is testing out the boundaries. So let's say that the motion is banning smoking. And then the POI would go, would you also ban drinking? And I guess this is kind of a lame example, but let's say that the motion bans social media for teens. And the POI would be, would you also ban internet for the teens? So the role of this is to, would you also ban this? Would you also oppose this? Would you also support this? So it's testing their principle. And for the person answering the POI, this puts them in a rock and a hard place, between a rock and a hard place, I guess, because then they're forced to say that one thing is correct and the other thing is not, which may put them in a logical, difficult situation. And they also might just have to say yes, which might be a big burden for them to take. So it does make it a little bit more difficult. Like, yeah. How would you respond to a principal POI? Like, for example, you got a principal POI, then what would you do? You would say, yes, we also believe that that should also be banned, if you think that it is generally defendable by your own case. If you don't, if you cannot defend that X with your own case, then you say, no, that is fundamentally different because of X reason. But the reason that I said that this is becoming obsolete these days is because if you're hearing this for the first time, it does sound pretty ludicrous. And I agree. And that's just something I agree with. So the response that some top debaters even give these days, and what I believe is the correct response, is that's not part of the debate. That's for another day. And that's why like these POIs are kind of losing its stuff. And if you okay, come back, let's go back to the person that gave this POI. If you gave this type of POI, what's your job to do? Then the debater is going to say yes or no, right? If they say yes, then you're going to say, hey, that speaker defended this horrible thing too. So can we trust that debater? That's what you're going to do. If they say, no, we're not defending this, then you would say, hey, they don't really have a principle. They're defending the thing in the motion, but not the thing in the POI. And you're saying that that's wishy-washy. All right, so that's the principle POI. Number 3. This is the POI. I guess it just gets a bit lamer. Let's give an example. POI, there are hundreds of kids in Africa dying. Do you still believe in X? Like you're giving imagery, an example that is quite shocking, that is uh it's quite horrible and bad and disgusting. And then you're able to communicate that to the judge. So in that case, it would be, not a good thing. So it becomes more difficult for the speaker to respond to. And I guess the benefit of giving this POI is that there's no smart response the speaker can give. Because, yeah, the speaker that is holding the floor would be, regardless of that, we think of X, and he would rebut to that. But that imagery, that example stays anyway. So that's why this POI also works. Number 4 would just be giving rebuttal. 15-second rebuttal. You said this, but I think that. If you do want to give rebuttal in POI, think about it if you really want to, because it's only 15 seconds. You're not going to do a good job. But if you're going to do it, then I would say attack the premise, not the mechanism. So say that premise is just not important, or my premise is more important, because it's kind of easier to say that in 15 seconds, and also because if you attack the mechanism, they'll just bring up another mechanism, and they'll just the POI would be kind of useless. All right, so how to respond to these 4 stuff? I already told you how to respond to 2. Number 1, just be smart. I don't know. Don't make stupid flaws for them to point out in the POI, and do acknowledge that people pointing out a flaw are also just a dumb debater. So don't just think that they are super correct. They might be wrong too. So if you got a flaw pointed out of it, just be smart, get out of it. Now from a tip of when you can't get out of it is just move on. The worst thing that you can do as a person holding the floor when you receive a POI is to just be stunned and say nothing for 5 seconds, say nothing for 10 seconds. It's the worst thing that you can do. Or if you I guess it would be even worse if you agree with them. But just don't be super stunned. Just move on. If you can't say anything, that's fine. If you want to say something, you can just restate your argument or restate your principle. However, we still think this, and then move on. I would say it's also equally as lame to say my DPM will respond to that or my later speaker will respond to that, because that's just admitting you can't respond to that. So just don't even say that. Just move on and move on to your case. It's like I said, in an AP, a POI, even if you got stunned like that, it can't really move the verdict of the debate. All right. And if the POI is a rebuttal, just you can respond to rebuttals. That's fine. POI is an example. Yeah, you can respond to the example, but that's not really a thing in AP. Unless you're really smart and you know how to do it. If you can do it, then do it. But if you're probably not going to know how to do it. So uh, just in the underlying example, there's going to be a point. Just rebut to that and move on. All right. Now, what do really smart people do when they give POIs? The main thing is you set the POI. If you set it, you bring it up later in the debate. Now, this is something that I don't really do because I'll be busy doing other stuff. But I think debaters better than me would point out the POI that happened in the debate and then use that to their advantage inside of their own speech, or give it to the speaker later to them and talk about and tell them to talk about the POI. Because the POI might have been your moment where you prove something that they're wrong. You use that in your speech and then get some attention. I do think that's the extent of it. You're getting some attention, but still, you can do that. All right. Uh, Other stuff in a POI. Eh. One more tip I would give is if you're giving a principal POI, it should probably be towards the PM or the LO. Like, because that's when they're starting the debate and you want to test the principle then. If you're giving a rebuttal, you would probably just give it to these like the whip or the op whip, because um if you're giving it to the DPM DLO, you already have the G dub O dub to respond to that. So why would you give rebuttal to them? But if it's gov whip op whip and you have no other time to rebut to them, then it kind of makes sense to give a rebuttal to the whip speakers as a POI. I think that makes sense. So conclusion of today is a POI. Have fun. It's fun. Have fun. And POIs are also a show for how rude, how aggressive, how calm the debater is going to be. It kind of shows that. Like, I've got some comments of how the POIs. For example, there are many cultures in POIs too. Um, like I've seen the Australian POI is where you hold your head with one hand and then point at your hand like this. I heard some people do that. And it's a interesting thing. Just use it to your advantage. Have fun with it. Bye bye.